Sort of before we get started, there are just a few, two big disclaimers. The first one is there have been several of us that have sort of prepared this evening. Several of us really felt that as we are ending the Generosity Project, that there's a really good opportunity there to also provide practical tools. That being said, we in no way claim to be financial advisors. I know that there are probably others on this call as well who are probably much more equipped as financial advisors than we whatsoever, but there are tools and tips and tricks that we over the years have learned that have just been very helpful, and therefore we thought, why not share this with the rest of our church family and love one another in that way. And then likewise, of course, also this evening is in no way a statement from Globe Church saying this is how we should be budgeting. So Globe Church is, of course, separate from this. That being said, this evening has sort of three big aims, with the underlying objective of laying a foundation of thinking about finances and really raising awareness of it. So after this evening, we hope that you have sort of increased self-awareness of how to budget and stuff, but also really we're hoping that this will also remove somewhat the stigma of budgeting and even open up conversations where that's necessary. And lastly, really to provide practical tools and methodologies and to support people that are in the process of budgeting. And likewise, I guess it is really for anyone, like whether you have never budgeted or whether you feel like you are a pro in this area and just need a refresher. It's very much open to all of that. Lastly, throughout this evening, if you feel like you have any questions that you want to be asking about anything specifically, you can send a direct message to Ben and Esther or Zoom. Ben or Esther will then probably interrupt me or Kenan, and then we can just address any of those questions. But also Ben and Esther have an awareness of what else we'll be discussing throughout the evening, so they might wait 1 or 2 minutes in case we're already discussing that. Amazing. I think that was for the first slide. Adriana, can you move to the next one? There we go. So this evening, sort of how it will take shape is we're just going to have a brief introduction and a conversation as well. We'll be discussing a few key budgeting principles. Following that, practical examples and resources, and also questions. And then we can go to the next one again. And really this evening, as I said, just like regardless of your income or the state that you're at, there is just wisdom around financial planning that we think should be for everyone. At this point, I'm briefly just going to share my screen. Find all the right things. And there we go. And let me actually if you could, on your phone, go to slido.com. I'll also grab my phone. There we go. And we sort of wanted to start off the evening. We want this evening to be fairly interactive, which I don't know if y'all have ever been in an accounting class before. Sometimes that's very difficult, and we try to really make it a bit more like that. And so when you hit slido.com, it says enter code here. The code that is written down is 366270. You can enter that one. Actually, if I've activated that one, hopefully you'll be able to enter it now. Let me see if that is working. Awesome. And then I don't know how it popped up on your phone or something, but on mine it says Q&A, and then it says polls. If you hit on the right one where it says polls, that's where you can, the big question that we wanted to start off with is, since you joined this evening, you've probably been thinking a little bit about budgeting, because at least it persuaded you enough to come to this meeting. And there we go. That's already a first response. So in this sort of slide that we'll just use for a few minutes, you can start, dropping in answers as we're already doing. I don't have to explain any further. Oh, I'm even seeing it is fun. to please Joost. Well, I really appreciate that. That's really good to hear. I'm very proud to hear that. I don't know if people can upvote, but feel free to upvote that one. Awesome. So we're not reckless. Stewardship, to honor God with our money. Wisdom, to plan giving. That's a really good one. Live with the future in mind. I think that's what that one's saying. Removes worries. Yes, that is really good. Not waste. Yeah, that's also super helpful. To overcome any debts. Let's see if there are any others that we missed. Cool. That's really helpful. Great. That already gives us a really good good idea of why indeed is budgeting. Like, I don't think I have to add so much more to it. I think for us, of course, for those in the room here that do have put their faith in Jesus, there is, of course, the idea as well that God is our sustainer and provider. And even through that there is just so much wisdom around how we deal with our finances, just as we're seeing here, and as some are already saying as well, there is in our hearts that we do feel selfish at times, but it does help us with being more generous to others, but also, less anxious. Cannot stress enough how many times I've heard people say, I don't know, my finances under control. I don't know what's happening financially this month. I will stop sharing. I'll go drop it back to you, Adriana. There we go. Thank you so much. So indeed, as we were seeing earlier, it is that idea of planning today for tomorrow. It is that idea of being less anxious around finances, but also, as we've been learning throughout the Generosity Project, of how can we be generous and grow in our generosity over the years, and what that looks like. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Nat and Jenna, who are going to have a bit of a conversation. Over to you.
Thanks, Joost. Yeah, Jenna and I thought we would have a bit of a debate, a chat, a discussion about coming from slightly different perspectives. So me being very, very always pro budgeting, and Jenna maybe a little bit more tentative in the past. So I'm going to ask Jenna a couple of questions about her relationship with budgeting. So Jenna, maybe could you tell us a little bit more about why you might have been tentative in the past to budget?
Yeah. Hi, guys. I have been working full-time for just under 10 years, and I've only been budgeting for about the last 3 years. So there's about 7 years there where I had sustaining income and wasn't doing any budgeting. I think my perception of budgeting was that it was going to be very restrictive, that it was going to be super boring, and that it would mean I would want to go out for dinner or coffee with a friend and have to look at my budget and be like, oh, I can't, awkward, and have to say no. I thought it would just remove all spontaneous joy from my life, honestly. And basically my situation was I would save a little bit every month. I would pay my bills, my rent, and then the rest would just get spent, right? That's budgeting, isn't it? And so I think I didn't feel like there was a massive need because there wasn't this massive debt piling up, and I knew that I was saving a little bit. So that seemed like a good thing. And yeah, I was enjoying myself and felt like I was living the spontaneous life and meeting my personal financial goals. And there was giving in there too. So there was like some generosity to the church. So I just didn't really massively see the need and was, a little bit put off by it. That was my experience before.
It sounds like you had a bit of a shift of opinion then in the last 3 years or something to trigger a change. What's made you move towards budgeting, Jenna?
Yeah, so 3 years ago, I got married to Kenan and we combined our finances, and he's on the opposite end of the spectrum, knows what £2.50 went to, or 0.79 pounds, where that went. And I think pre-getting married, we knew this was going to be something that we'd have to work together to work through. And we actually thought this was going to be our biggest marriage conflict. It turned out that it's been an absolute joy for me. I've learned so much about budgeting, and I think I've really become to see the value in it. I think just some things I have learned, since starting to budget is that It actually isn't restrictive in the way that I thought it would be. I haven't had to decline any coffees, thankfully. We plan for that. But I think even more so than that, it is more freeing, because now we sit down at the start of every month and we think through what are our goals and what is our vision for how we want to spend this month's income. And we plan for it and we have discussions about it. And actually, it's more intentional than what it was before. And we can even plan in a little buffer for spontaneous spending, like, because that was a value of mine. And I think because I am someone who's very goal oriented, the idea of having financial goals that you work towards really resonates with me. So that's been some of the things that have come out from it that have been good. And I think you can be a lot more intentional, and actually you'll get more satisfaction out of that because you've thought a little bit more about it and it's actually aligned with something that you really want. So yeah, I've actually found more sort of financial satisfaction over the past few years than had previously. So I mean, that's like a short little overview of my journey, but Nat, tell me about you. What are your experiences?
Yeah, my natural inclination with money is to be incredibly thrifty. I just kind of want to store up my little treasures. So even though I was always keen to budget, it's not necessarily come from a particularly positive relationship with money. But it has meant that I'm not a big spender. So a bit like you, Jenna, there will be some of us who will have debts and issues with overspending, but that wasn't my experience. But for me, I actually think budgeting has been really good to kind of reflect on my values and then realize when I'm not living out my values. So if I say it's important for me to spend time with friends and I want to budget money to eat out and have a good time and enjoy the good gifts that God gives us, and then I don't do that all month and I've got this bit of money at the end, actually I found it quite liberating to go, hang on, it was the intention to spend that. And yeah, you could save that, or you could do something else with it, or you could go, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have dinner with a friend, because my inclination is to not do that. And actually, I was thinking a lot about this because I have a friend who basically, for quite a lot, a really good friend, we used to hang out quite a lot, and often we would plan to eat out. And kind of last minute, she'd go, I'm really sorry, I can't afford to eat out. And be like, no problem, why don't you come to mine, I'll cook, like, not a problem. But it kept happening. And then she got a new job and had told me she was getting a significant pay rise, but this continued to happen. And eventually I said, what on earth is going on? Like, I thought you'd, your financial situation was a lot better. And she went, yeah, but I there's no money. I spent it all. Or I think she'd booked a couple of holidays kind of all in advance. And because she did no financial planning, she never understood that, if there was £600 in the bank, she'd go, great, I can spend that on a holiday. There was never a sense of future planning. And so she'd find herself continuously in the situation of going, I can't afford to do what I want to do, or I can't have a coffee with a friend because I can't pay for it. And she's since done the Christians Against Poverty money training course and has found it absolutely amazing. And now when I spend time with her, we don't have to do a last minute change of plan because she's budgeted for that. So to me, it kind of signifies liberation, actually, rather than restraint, which I guess what you're reflecting on a bit earlier. So Jenna, could you say a little bit about maybe specifically how it might have helped you? You mentioned having targets and goals.
Yeah, so I think just to give like a practical example, I think it's really helpful just to like share and talk about money. So just like being transparent. We, at the start of this year, we were talking about my job and I wasn't sure whether a career transition would be a good idea or not, but actually we thought it would be a good idea for me to do a certification and do a training, because that would give me some skills in management. And we put money aside for that, and we budgeted for it, and then we paid for it, and now I've completed the course. So I think it's just a really practical example of when you sit down and discuss what are your goals personally, put money aside slowly, you see that goal building up, and then there's a real opportunity to do that. Had we not maybe done that, maybe I would have felt like, oh, that's a really expensive course. I'm not sure like how we're going to make that happen. It's just another expense. So that was a practical example that came up recently. And then I think when it comes to, talking about finances and kind of sharing more with people and kind of normalizing the conversation, I would say I was really challenged around this because friend of mine in the States. So she's in Dallas, Texas, and she's in a small group, and they actually share their budget as a small group, and they actually hold one another accountable to the goals that they've made, down to the actual amounts and the figures. And when she told me this, Kenan and I were on a Zoom, we were on like a FaceTime, our jaws just dropped, and we just thought, how would that work in the UK? Like here, like you said, you were, you had this goal of being generous, and how are you using your money? But that's what they do in their small group. They have 2 leaders who are tasked with, they're trained by like the church in dealing with how to facilitate those conversations. And then I think they do like once a month or something, just a little finance conversation. So if we think about the spectrum, I do think there's a lot we could do. Maybe that exact format wouldn't work in the UK, but we can absolutely talk about values and goals without talking about specific amounts, and share like what are some of the things you want to achieve with your giving, or just with your finances in general, and maybe have someone that you're talking about that with and who's holding you accountable, whether that's your small group or just someone you trust. Yeah, you don't have to talk about specifics, but definitely I think we can do more to share and hold one another accountable and make it more normal.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite hardcore, but I find that really encouraging. I guess thinking about what we were talking about in recent weeks in small groups with the Generosity Project, I think it's just that open dialogue about generosity, giving, money. Yeah, and as you say, not necessarily sharing numbers, but there is a great joy in having God's family around us to be supportive. And I don't think anyone's would be out there to kind of criticize and kindly our budgets, but to help us learn and grow and be more like Christ. Was there anything else that you wanted to maybe comment on, Jenna?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nat. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think money is more than just that. It's very emotional. And I do just want to recognize and validate that everyone has a historical context when it comes to money. So like take my example, like my family didn't have a lot of money, and it was always something that we seem to not have enough of. And I think, so like for me, I think my reaction to that is just there's emotions around it. There's emotions about receiving income and having money. And I think that's going to be true for all of us. So I think just recognizing that changing your habits in this space is not going to be as easy as just up here. Like there's an emotional element attached to this for all of us, and it can be really hard. So I think it's okay if it's hard, if it's okay if it feels uncomfortable. I actually think, yeah, it's emotional. And I just want to say, like, absolutely, that's okay. If you're like, why is this so hard? Why is this making me feel some type of way? I think that's because we grow up with so many views about money, what our parents have taught us, what we've observed. Either we follow in their footsteps or we go the complete other direction. I just think, yeah, there's so much there. So yeah, just be praying. I would say be prayerful about those emotions, and just, yeah, be honest about those. Maybe try and share with someone. But yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jenna, for sharing some of your personal budgeting habits. Joost, back over to you.
Thank you both so much. That was really encouraging, really helpful. I'm immediately going to throw it over to Kenan, if Adriana can share again. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, thanks everyone. So yeah, I'm the budget keen bean that managed to change Jenna's ways. But no, it's really helpful, again, being reminded that people come from different backgrounds, and both ways need work and prayer and change. So yeah, that was really helpful. So yeah, if you go to the next slide, Adriana. So we just want to start with some kind of key principles, some general budgeting advice. These are good things to be aiming to do as you start budgeting. So there are 5 rules. These are adapted from a tool that I'll actually be going through later, but I think they can be applied to any sort of budget. Okay, so firstly, yeah, we've put in this language of you want to aim to. It's like these are good things to be working towards. Don't worry if you don't get it straight away. These are your targets. So first of all, you want to start your budget at the beginning of the month. So you want to be planning ahead. You want to avoid being too reactionary with your money. So the idea is that most people get paid at the end of the month, but even if you receive your money at different intervals, the principle is to budget that money as close to as when you receive it as possible. So then you're planned for what's coming ahead until that next time that money is going to be coming in. The second principle is to give every pound a job. And so what this means is assigning each of those pounds of your income into a budget category. So this will help you see what your money will be able to do for you this month. So this should include important and usually the more boring categories of like your rent and your groceries. But this is also where you get to budget for your fun activities, you know, eating out, your Netflix subscription, a board game fund, which is what I like to have. So yeah, that's giving every pound a job. Yes, fund money, exactly. So number 3 is to know your true expenses. This is a little going back to Natalie's friend who was just spending the money. I wasn't sure, but also we're all likely to have some payments which we only make once or twice a year, which also make a big dent in our bank balance. So this principle requires you to think about what those might be and break them down into monthly chunks. An obvious example, although probably not very applicable for us in London, unfortunately, is that, let's say for your car insurance, you maybe pay that once a year, it's £1,200. So that means every month you're assigning that £100 into that category. Then in a year's time, you've been building that up. Wow, I've got this £1,200 ready to go. And so that's a way that you're working towards it. So that's knowing your true expenses. The 4th principle is rolling with the punches. Now, I think this is really important because it removes some of the pressure to feel that you have to get your budget absolutely perfect. I mean, no one can tell the future. There are things that come up. So the idea here is that, yeah, there's no such thing as a perfect month. Sometimes things come up. Something breaks. You need to replace something. Maybe a friend is visiting, you weren't planning, and you decide to go out to eat that month. It's okay, but then what you need to do is reassign some of that money that you gave to a different job into the bit we overspent. So maybe you didn't need to buy any new clothes this month, so you can move some of that money to cover that eating out that you did. And this is quite important to do because you want to avoid just overspending in all your categories, because that is not a sustainable way of living. So when you budget all your income, you know that this is what you have to, the money that you have to play with. And so then you're able to move it around. So that's the idea of rolling with the punches, just adapting as the month goes on. The 5th principle is not really aimed for when you're just starting to budget, and it can seem extremely daunting and totally unrealistic, living in London especially, but the idea is to plan 2 months ahead. So budgeting not just for, you know, June, but I've also budgeted for July. And it's not everything, but this idea is to break that paycheck to paycheck cycle. You're like, oh, the 28th of the month can't come sooner because if I don't, I won't be able to pay my rent. It's that, okay, I've actually built up enough money that my rent is sorted for the following month. And so I'm not so stressed, and that's it. But this is not, don't worry about this at the start. This is just something to be like, as you're maybe feeling more comfortable with your budget, you're able to do. So yeah, these are some things to keep in mind. They can be a good first place. And now we're going to go over a couple of particular budgeting templates, practically how you might want to plan out your money. So I think handing back to Joost.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you can go to the next slide, Adriana. Awesome. I'm going to try and share this screen. Can everyone see this? Someone give me a thumbs up. People seeing this slide or not? Or this Excel document?
Not yet, Joost.
No.
It's saying that I'm screen sharing. I think.
You can switch between what you look at. If you go under view options, you can see Jost's spreadsheet.
Do I
There we
need to
go.
be screen sharing, Joost?
You can
Is
turn
it-
yours
is it-
off.
Yeah, I was
That
going
might
to say,
be
it doesn't
easier.
actually say anything. There you go.
I don't have to say, Alistair, that was actually brilliant. I personally didn't even know that, so I even learned something about Zoom today. Amazing. So what we tried to do is, when we were thinking about budgeting 101, to be very blunt with all of you, initially when we started thinking about this, we had this great idea of like loads of different areas and very quickly realized we're going way too advanced. And so what we tried to come up with is actually, can we just send a generic template to our church family that will help them and make them feel equipped, or even try to provide a very practical tool. So below here, just on the first sheet here, we've just provided some of the things that Ken has just walked through, but also some reiteration down here. Now to sort of run you through 2 templates that we've included here. We've tried to adjust them somewhat to make them generic. There are 2 templates in there on slide 2-1 and on sheet 2-1 and on sheet 4 there's a different one. And really the purpose is, if you've never budgeted or you would prefer to get some inspiration from some of this, you can tweak it, of course, again to your personal one, or just, straight away start using this Excel sheet yourself. Now and I'm going to walk through both of them. Likewise, just a heads up for everyone is like some of the things that we'll be including here might not be applicable to you at all. Others might be very applicable. Ken was earlier mentioning about like car insurance. That is one of those examples that apply for some people, but not to all people. And that's the same with, having a budget for coffee or for board games. Maybe you hate board games, which makes you a very strange person, but that's a different topic. Anyway, let me just run you through. I'm just going to run you all through 2 different templates, and then Adriana has sent the document as well in the Zoom chat. It's also attached in the Globe email that Adriana sent out earlier this afternoon, so you can always access it if necessary. Awesome. So this is the first one. Do I need to zoom in more, or can everyone read this?
You need to zoom.
I thought this was going to be an issue. All right. Is that better, Nat?
If you double click
Yeah.
on home, Joost, you can make your screen smaller. On the home at the top left.
Which one was I have to double click on?
Yeah, there you
Is
go.
that easier? There we go. Okay,
There we
that's
go,
much
that's good.
better. I know we're recruiting Alistair for next time. This is great. Amazing. So don't be overwhelmed by this yet. Don't say start thinking about it for your personal cases. Just like have a look and slowly like take in the information that's here. At the top here, we have inserted a monthly income. We've just used a generic number here of £1,000. Then on the left box here, there's different categories, which are followed by a specific item and the rule numbers. Followed that, there's the percentage of your income. That's basically saying, out of my income, how much money am I spending on, let's say, rent? So in this case, or in percentage, of course, percentile. Here it says £200, which is very low, of course, for London, but you'll see an example budget later on. Immediately, that is already with a calculated field, who I'll immediately say that's 20% of your monthly income. What we've tried to do is actually categorize and actually mention a few different examples so that you can actually go away and actually say which of these different specific items apply to my personal situation. That will actually really help you with regards to what Kenan was mentioning earlier around know your true expenses. And likewise, what Kenan was saying was, the first time that you'll do a budget, at the end of it, you'll be like, wait a second, I thought I budgeted, but there were still different things that I needed to tweak. That is completely okay. And you need to be flexible to some degree with it. So throughout your time, you'll actually be adjusting here and there. So we've mentioned different bills, council tax, water, electricity, mobile phone, transportation, and whatever those might be, right? And that's for you to add in. Some of the other things we've mentioned here was savings. As you will see here in the right corner is you'll see a savings category. Now, if you fill out, for example, here I've mentioned emergency fund, which is also helpful, as Ken was mentioning about planning 2 months ahead. So what happens if one of you or both, or you lose your job? Can you pay next month's rent? That will immediately be filled out here as well. So for example, if you fill out here 100, you can have that inserted there, or that automatically inserts there. So let's say here I have travel fund. if I, let's say, put £50 down, this changed immediately to £50. Now, if your month has come, so for example, this coming month is, let's say, July, and I would start that at the beginning of July. When I've done that budget for the month of July, and I've said, okay, I'm going to put £50 aside for this month, then here I can just quickly add £50 to it. Now, when it comes to next month again, and you again doing £50, you can just quickly change that at the end of your budget to 100 once you put that money aside. I personally would recommend for within, I don't know, most of you are already doing this, but within your virtual bank account, you have your, your main checkings account, and then underneath that you can have all these different savings accounts. That is a way that we've personally found very helpful, to just have different accounts that fit different items. So for example, emergency fund or travel fund or whatever else that might be, right? It might be, I don't know, an event that you're planning and so forth. Likewise here, let's say you are, Jenna's example was really helpful. If they, for example, are planning for a fee that's coming up, if I, for example, here we type in school fee, that auto-populates here to the right as well. So you can expand this however much you want to. We've just included 5 different ones here. So let's say your monthly budgeting for clothes, or let's say for an event, that auto-populates there. And that is the same, of course, with the rest of the money here. And it's good for you to sort of have an overview of like, oh, how much of my income have I spent so far? Therefore, you're also seeing here at the bottom your total income and the difference after expenses. So this is, for example, right now, the money that's left over. These are your total expenses so far, and that is the percentage of what you have spent out of the total money. Other expenses that we've included here are food and drink, so groceries and eating out. Could also very much be that you have a coffee bill, of course. Giving, we've just gone through the generosity project, so I think this will probably resonate with a lot of people. This could be, giving to the church or to a specific ministry that you want to be supporting, or a person or a charity, and so forth. And then lastly, one of the parts that we thought was important to mention as well is any upcoming expenses. So already start thinking about, you could do this, of course, through the savings tool, but also through something else. So for example, if you are aware, oh, you know what, I do have, my best friend is, turning 30 next month, and I really want to buy them this, I don't know, very expensive board game. Then you could already decide, could I over the next few months put away 10 or 20 pounds, so that I don't all of a sudden have, so it doesn't all of a sudden hit me in the face when it comes to, having a bill of 100 or 200 pounds. So that's one way, one template just to budget it, which can be helpful. We've likewise included just like an example budget here. So that one is a bit more filled out, but I think we've sort of gone through this first one already, but both of them might be helpful for you as you go about your day. Then the other template, which has been so kindly provided by Nat, is also has different, very much serves the same purpose, but it's a bit more spread out and probably a bit more, I personally thought that this was really well categorized as well. So both monthly budget with typical expenses that we've been discussing, travel in London, your clothes, food shopping, and so forth. And that's all, of course, on the basis of her salary being here. The total budget or the total expenditure of each category is automatically being fed into that. So it will automatically say, this is how much you're spending in total. And then it's likewise saying, this is how much your remaining funds are at that point. And this, this again, these are just, again, some examples. This is in no way to dictate for you how much money you should be spending where. I know that when it comes to, I think we all have wants and we have needs, and our needs are, there are probably some things in our lives that we think, oh, we really need this, that we might not actually need. And there are also things in our lives that we are like, I really want this, that we might not actually want. But that's not for us, of course, to really place judgment on during this call itself. There might be another space to discuss that. That's a different topic, I guess. Before I hand it over to Kenan to provide one of his a tool that he uses, does anyone have any questions on this? I'm not seeing a chat, so I assume that is, feel free to just unmute if you do have any questions, or send it to Ben and Esther. If later on you do want to discuss it, do feel free to mention it later on as well. I'm going to stop at this point and actually hand over briefly to Kenan as well to share his screen.
Great, thank you, Joost. Okay, so I'm going to be sharing some software that I use called You Need a Budget. That's the name of the company. It's shortened to be called YNAB. So that's sometimes how you might see it. So hopefully you guys can see my screen. A few things up front about this software. It does require a subscription fee, which I think you're like, well, I'm trying to budget. I don't have money for a budgeting software, but yes, this might not be the tool for you. Jana and I, this is what we use. We found it particularly helpful. I think it works out to be about £5 a month when you pay for the year. But so there are some caveats to that. If you are a student, they do give you a year free, and they do have a free trial as well. But that's just some stuff up front. So this is also where we had some of the rules or the principles. They're from this You Need a Budget companies and this is how their software kind of plays into some of those rules. So when you are logged into your account, you'll have your bank accounts on the left-hand side of the screen. So this is where your money actually is. In maybe different bank accounts, maybe you have some cash. So in this example, let's say sort of imagining it's the beginning of the month, my paychecks come in, then I'll go to the budget tab, and this is what you're seeing on the main section of the screen is my budget. So this is where I have given every pound a job. So this is that idea of I've given every pound a job. And so we just have all the different categories. Again, you can name these anything you like. We found it helpful to order it in priority. So we make sure that we give money to what it is that we need to. And I think just, after being the generosity project, there is something about wanting to make sure that we do set aside that money for our tithing, charitable, and just wanting to be generous maybe with gifts as well. So this is where you'd input, you'd assign the money for each month. Then we have sort of fixed, mandatory fixed expenses, phone, rent, council tax. Maybe you have a subscription for your Oyster, etc. Then there's stuff that maybe changes each month, your electricity, your gas bills. I've been saving a lot of money on a haircut for the last year, so actually I have been putting more money in this. I haven't put quite so much money in this category. And then this is, I guess, more like, okay, all these important things which I know I need to pay to survive have been put away, and this is where I'm able to have some of the fun money. And this is where you might want to break it down into categories. And this is where you can decide what's, important to you. And kind of like what Nat's saying, I enjoy eating out, spending with friends, so I can make sure I put that money, and you can make sure that you're able to spend it. So it is that freedom. It kind of will allow you to, enjoy the money that God has given you. And then at the bottom, you can have savings goals. So at this point, I was saving to do a coding course, so we'll be putting money aside. One example of a true expense, every year Christmas comes around, pretty much every year, right? And so, you need to buy presents, hopefully, for people that you love. And then it can become a very expensive time of the year. So this is just an example of, let's say, okay, I know I'm hoping to buy gifts for people at Christmas time. How about I set aside a little bit of money each month? And what you can do is you can, within the software, you can set a goal. Okay, I'm feeling quite generous at Christmas. I'm going to have £200 to be able to spend on friends and family, and it will break down what you need to budget this month to stay on track for that. That's pretty much the kind of basic overview of that. Were there any questions about that?
So would you fill this out every month? So like mandatory, regular, would you put in haircut if you know you're going to need a haircut that month? Or, yeah, because I was reading this book, Money Mentor by Ash Carter, and he says to check up on, sort of do it every like 3 months or more, which I quite like that idea, because I don't massively want to sit down every month to like say, oh, I'm going to spend £15 on a haircut next month. So yeah, is there a way to sort of not do it every month, but maybe every couple of months, but still have that, that precision in what you budget?
I'm sure there is. Would you want to avoid budgeting at all for that, or would you? It's just like the important things, and then maybe you wouldn't do certain expenses. I
would possibly do it, maybe budget more high level. So say I have general expenses every month,
sure.
50 quid.
Yeah.
So like that.
100. So yes, 100%. This, you can go as in detail as you like to as general as you like. So I mean, for even this could just be utilities. If you really wanted to, it's a bit riskier, but you can maybe mix your groceries and eating out to just be food. Or you could just have bills, I guess. For me, this feels like, no, I must be more specific. But this is where you have to find what works for you. And you can just say, I have my bills and giving, and then it's a lot more manageable. You might feel it's more manageable, and you're not worrying about it so much. This really does, the software does encourage you to really track your spending. So this is it can be quite intense in the sense that you do need to, to get the best out of it, you do need to input your spending. And again, I think this, at the start, it is a bit harder. Again, it's like a habit that you need to kind of learn to do. We have found it helpful. I don't know, Jana, maybe you can say how you found it, putting it in.
I would just say, like, because the question, I totally and 100% get the idea, like the time spent, you don't want to revisit it. I think with the principle of giving every pound a job, you kind of have to know what that money is being spent on if it's not going to one of your fixed expenses. So say you have like £500 left over. You could give all £500 fun money allocation in your mind. But would that be aligned with your long-term goals? Would that be the right thing to do with that £500? So I think that's where that whole giving every pound a job comes in. To, if you can find a way to do that and only have to do it once every 3 months, absolutely. You would just have to know like what you wanted that money to do for you in that same time period. I think that's how I would approach.
I think so, Joanna. Yeah, do you want to follow up on that? Any other questions?
Nope, I'm happy. There's a couple of questions in the chat though. Thanks.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
Oh, sorry, I can ask it if you want.
Yeah, thanks.
Mine was just kind of what you use this software for. Why do you use it over, say, Excel? Does it save you time? And then also, does the software link to your bank accounts? Because I know companies like Monzo track where you spend your money, which saves you effort, but there's never something that does everything. A couple of questions there, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, okay, why do I use this against other things? partly it's just, it's again, I just picked it at some point and it kind of worked and it stuck. But what I liked about it was that they had some principles which aligned with the software, which kind of helped me get started. There are apps for it, for Android and iOS, and then you can use it on the web. So both Jana and I have it on our phones. So it's very easy to input something once you've spent it. Unfortunately, in the UK, it's a US company. In the UK, they don't have like it auto signed to a bank account, but with your online bank account, you can export as a CSV file, and it does allow you to import that into your accounts. So then you'll have your spending like that. You mentioned Monzo. I think if you do have a Monzo card and they have the POTS functionality, that's also like a really fantastic way to do it, kind of integrated into your bank account. There may be other banks, but yeah, this has just been a really helpful way for us to have a shared thing that's easy to view. It's a little bit nicer than looking at a spreadsheet, but if you're happy with the spreadsheet, that's also what you can do. I think this is it's worked for, like I said, for Jenna and I. The interface is quite nice. Like, it's very easy to just add a new category. One thing I haven't gone into is that if I go to my account, what I can do is I can actually set up monthly or repeating expenses. So these are all my kind of repeating expenses here. And then when I budget for the month, it will tell me, hey, you've got this much that you're saying that will need to be spent. Make sure you at least cover this. So I know, oh, okay, yeah, I've budgeted for that. So that was also kind of like quite a nice feature of it.
Sarah, Emily, and Bethan's question about reviewing at the end of the month. If you went to a shop and bought things from multiple categories, how do you remember what was what? So I think if you go to a shop like Tesco and everything, you can do it. You could break it out into like toiletries and food if you wanted to, or you could just be like everything that you buy from Tesco goes into your groceries category and not be too specific about that. Kennan's approach would be he would want to break everything out. I basically feel like fewer categories just makes things easier. So I think you can be flexible about how granular you want to go. And there's flexibility and granularity there, but I don't know if that answers the question fully.
Just to add to that, though, if you are keen to spread that out, so yeah, maybe you bought some toiletries in the food bit at Tesco and you can't quite remember, then you could just say, oh, it was about £10, and then at least you've kind of had a rough idea. So again, this is the idea. It's like, this is just a really helpful. So just because I put £30 in public transport for June, it doesn't mean I have to spend that. It just means that, hey, I'm covered for this. And this is where, there's that other principle, roll with the punches. Oh, I didn't spend the £30, but I did overspend on my whatever. I can move that around. So that's the idea of why you would want to put the money into the categories.
It's worth saying.
Oh, sorry, go for it, Jenna.
No, sorry, just on this, I think we probably got it to it takes about an hour to do per month. So it is a lot of setup at the start, but it's not something that takes an intensive amount of time once you get it going. Sorry, Esther.
No problem. I just want to flag that there's a question on Slido. What do you think the correct balance is on budgeting versus being too legalistic or it taking ages to plan? Who wants to answer that?
Too legalistic. Okay, so you're being too legalistic and taking too long to plan.
I'm going to go for this because I think it's about where your heart is. Like, it is possible to be really saving money, but have that be what your heart is putting its trust in. And saving money is like a good thing. Being generous is a good thing. But I think if you're putting your trust in that, and if you're, I think if you're, or like, you're putting your trust in your fund money or whatever, I think whatever, you just have to be careful about, kind of where your heart situation is. And that's a harder one, I think, to navigate, because I think we'll be inclined to one way or the other, but not sure what other people think.
Yeah, that's super helpful. One thing actually that jumped to mind there was what we try to do is outside of like specific ministries that we're trying to give to, we also budget for generosity. So we put a little bit of money aside for the future. And so throughout the last few years, there have been several moments in which God has really put in our hearts to give money to someone or to a specific ministry. And in that way, there was a lot of flexibility around, oh, actually, we have money saved up, but also at the same time, sometimes for me personally, sometimes, for example, monthly giving to a ministry can just feel like, it can almost feel like an expenditure. But that is, I have to reevaluate my heart and go, no, actually, God, you have given me all this money. Like, how can this be used for your glory? And that's just like a general reminder over and over and over again that I think even throughout the generosity project, we've been learning about. And yeah, to reiterate what Jana says, it really is about checking your own heart and realizing again, like, how can this be used for His glory with all that we've been given.
Can I just say, I think we've been called to live in freedom, and if we've budgeted so much that we can't, I don't know, pay for someone's coffee when they really need it, or if we can't, if we've counted every, I'm not saying it's wrong to count every penny, but if we're looking at the budget in such a scrutinous way of like, there's no flexibility, or the idea of budgeting is to be able to live in freedom. It's to go, oh, I planned for this, or I was financially careful, therefore I don't have to worry in the future. Like, the idea is freedom. It isn't to fulfill your budget to the exact penny. Yay, I'm awesome, I've like completed the budget. So I would say it's not legalistic, and it's a really good question. But budgeting should look like freedom, and following it is so that you can live in freedom, not to kind of for any other purpose, if that helps.
Yeah. So, yeah, great questions. Up next was some other resources, which I was going to show. So actually, I'm going to stop sharing, and maybe Adriana, if you could just share that last slide for the other resources. Oh, great. Are we planning on sharing this slide or this slideshow maybe? I don't know. Maybe there's a way to.
Yeah, I can do. I can pop it in a newsletter or put it on somewhere. It will happen. It will be shared.
Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, again, we wanted to put a few things that we found helpful, or like some good resources. Just looking through. Yeah, so there will be others, and maybe some other people here that have some other stuff that they've used that they might want to, if they want to share, that'd be great to put it in the chat or just speak up. The automatic millionaire, nice. Yeah,
There's also another question that just came in. Don't know if you guys want to tackle it now. It is, how can we approach budgeting when we are being super careful and our money just isn't stretching far enough, / we're on a low income? I'll paste it here for everyone's benefit.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben and Esther. I think Jos is going to cover some of that in a bit on one of the example budgets. Yeah, as you say, we don't want to assume that, you know, things happen to our finances. Lots of people were put on furlough last year, and lots of people lost jobs and that kind of thing. So these things happen. So we'll run it through with one of the sample budgets, so you can kind of see what happens if your income is lower, what does that mean for your fixed finances, that you can't just randomly change your rent one month, and how does that affect other things. So we will go through that in a bit.
Awesome. I could actually let's see. Oh, Kenneth, was there anything else you wanted to still mention on these tools and books and stuff?
No, it really was just to encourage you. There are resources out there. There are people in your focus groups in the church that want to be able to help, and it's just about finding what works for you. And we were just kind of, as we were saying, like, encourage people to be thinking about the way that they handle their money. So yeah, this is just a selection that we found helpful, but there will be some other stuff. So yeah, thanks, Jos.
Amazing. And also, literally, like, to reiterate as well, what is super important with any resources is there will be at times you'll come across resources that you really like. I do always recommend for people to cross-reference their own resources and really double check with other places as well, whether they are you know, somewhat in line with one another. I think that within sort of not just budgeting, but also in financial advice more broadly, that there are, like, to some degree, some conflicting voices, but there's a lot of general consensus on a lot of different principles. These are just some of the tools that we found helpful. What I'm actually going to do is quickly share screen again. Sorry, Adriana. Awesome. So you can see this budget again, and what the question that just came in is a really good question. And of course, apologies if we didn't fully, if we didn't stress that, but we, throughout this, when we were talking about budgeting, of course, that was very much assuming that we are living on a livable budget. Now, for some people, that might not be the case. It might also likewise be the case that someone loses a job or ends up changing a job. What is very helpful, I think, when it comes to budgeting is, let's say, that this does give some piece an overview, so that if such a situation helps, that you are better equipped to handle with such cases. Likewise, what it does help is, and I can actually show this very explicitly here, is, let's say you were initially on, let's say, £1,000, and then your salary drops to 500, right? And the first thing that you see here all of a sudden is actually, with what you had previously budgeted, it is 11% over than what you are spending yourself, right? So it immediately pops up here as well, saying minus 55. Now, having this, of course, will help you then with going through it and actually saying, okay, I'm spending this much on bills. How much is the total money that I'm spending on bills? And likewise, what does that mean for me trying to save? Well, it might actually mean that actually for a while, saving isn't possible. Like, I recognize that. And that is I mean, for a lot of us, I think for most people who are students or have just graduated, there's often very much a reality that actually saving is something that just isn't in the picture yet. And it is very much paycheck to paycheck. But what it is trying to do with helping with a budget is actually, regardless of what your income is actually having a good overview of where's your money going to. I rarely have, it was only a few weeks ago that I was talking to someone, and she is a lady who is probably in her mid-50s, and she told me she'd never used a budget in her life, but she had everything in her head. She literally had every single expenditure lined up in her head. and that's how she budgeted. Now, I have a lot of respect for that. I don't think that that is the case for most of us. And so actually having a bit of an overview and to reiterate what Ken was saying earlier, like really knowing your true expense and being aware of that is really important for that, so that you can actually discern like, okay, what does this look like for the coming months, but also being aware, what is my current situation and what is my situation going to look like for the coming months. So for example, if you have been able to save up, let's say £1,000, but now you're having an overspend of £100, well, then it's very likely that you'll only be able to maintain that from a budgetary or financial perspective for, let's say, another few months. And so this really does help with longer term planning. And I think I can confidently speak for all of us that throughout our lifetimes, our budgets will be, sometimes more on the bright side than other times. It is fluctuating and income does change, but it does sort of help with having a good overview of what's happening. I'm going to stop sharing here briefly, and Adriana, if you could go to the last slide. I'm just going to leave some or mention a few other things, which is very quickly to just reiterate a few key points that Canon just mentioned earlier, which is start your budget at the beginning of the month, give every pound a job, know your true expenses, roll with the punches, and plan 2 months ahead. We would really like to encourage you to, if you've never budgeted or are somewhat budgeting, yes or no, maybe to start in 2 weeks when the 1st of July comes around again, or end of June, whenever you get paid, to just give it a try and see, and not just stick with it for 1 month, but really try to stick with it at least for 2 or 3 months, because I know that the first month can be very daunting, and that's when you're really putting a lot of work in. And throughout that month of July, you'll also start recognizing, oh, wait a second, I forgot that I have a subscription to Disney Plus. That is not the £10 that I'm not calculated for, or those sorts of things. Likewise, if, as we mentioned in the beginning, we are in no way financial advisors, but I do think that as a church, we want to be open with one another. If there is someone that you're meeting up with regularly, for example, to do Bible studies, or just a friend that you're trying to catch up with, we would encourage you to speak to them if that is something that is that you think might be helpful. We're also very much aware that, of course, for some, that there might be a case that's either here on this call today or for someone who might be listening to it in the future, that some people just really struggle with, I guess, financial freedom right now, so that they are just really overwhelmed with the amount of debt that they have. There is an organization called Christians Against Poverty. They have a helpline that you could call to discuss and to seek help if that is your case. They're really, really helpful. And actually, what we wanted to do with this evening was really try to see if, or really try to see what the actual quote unquote appetite is for like a budgeting evening, but also to see like, okay, what is it that we could do in the future? Like, do we want it to stay like this? Do we want to go beyond this? As we called it 101, it was more basic than, it was still laying the foundations. But also aware that maybe in the future we might do something through Christians Against Poverty. They're an excellent organization that have a lot of wisdom in this field and have been working, I think, since the 90s or something on this theme. Exactly. We might be going to Budgeting 102 with Alistair as our Zoom and Excel expert. And then one of the last things to mention is, I know that throughout the pandemic, some of us might have been very much affected and impacted by financially due to loss of jobs and stuff. We do have at Globe Church a Globe Welfare Fund that was specifically set up for people that might have been impacted by the pandemic. There are sort of, there's still money available in there, but there are sort of, I guess, quote unquote requirements. But if that is something that you think might be helpful, come to speak to me or Adriana, and we can send you in the right direction. And that is for us, of course, as a family, that we're trying to care for one another. And I think that was most of it for this evening. I think the last thing to mention is if there's any more questions, shoot them our way. Otherwise, enjoy your evening, I guess. So yeah.